What if the hardest season reveals what you're really trusting in and where your hope truly is? Good morning. Today we're looking at Genesis chapter 47, verses 13 through 31. And I encourage you to read this passage personally because it shows us God's provision in crisis, the shifting nature of earthly security, and the importance of finishing well. In verses 13 through 17, the famine becomes severe, and the people of Egypt run out of money to buy food. They come to Joseph, and he provides grain in exchange for their livestock. This shows how desperate the situation has become. Earthly resources begin to fail one by one. In verses 18 through 22, when their livestock is gone, the people return and offer their land and themselves in exchange for food. Joseph accepts and establishes a system where the land belongs to Pharaoh and the people will give a portion of their produce going forward. This passage can feel heavy, but it shows a key reality. In times of crisis, what people trust in is revealed. Their survival depends entirely on provision outside of themselves. In verses 23 through 26, Joseph organizes the system. The people can continue living and working. They respond with gratitude, saying, "Thou hast saved our lives." Joseph's leadership preserves the nation. What could have ended in total destruction instead becomes structured survival. In verse 27, we see a contrast. While Egypt is struggling, Israel dwells in Goshen, multiplies, and prospers. This highlights the distinct care for his people. Even in the same famine, God sustains his covenant family in a very unique way. In verses 28 through 31, the focus shifts to Jacob near the end of his life. He calls Joseph and asks him not to bury him in Egypt, but to take him back to the land of his fathers. This is important. Jacob is living in Egypt, but his hope is not in Egypt. He's looking forward to God's promise. Even at the end of his life, his faith is anchored in what God has said, not in where he currently is. We can also see how this passage teaches us that earthly security quickly changes, but God's provision remains steady. It also reminds us to keep an internal perspective, an eternal mindset, especially as we approach the later seasons of life. And we can also see how this passage points us to Christ. Just as Joseph became the source of life and provision during the famine, Jesus Christ is the true source of life for those who come to him. And just as Jacob looked beyond Egypt to the promise, believers are called to look beyond this world to what God has prepared. Today, take a moment to evaluate what you're truly trusting in, your resources, your position, or God's provision. Choose to place your confidence in him and live with an eternal perspective, remembering that where you are now is not your final home. God bless.